Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. It's never been easier for Australian investors to access international markets, but with those markets being battered by rising interest rates and other global factors, it's been a pretty wild ride at times. Throw in the Aussie dollar and, well, who knows where it's been going. So as 2022 draws to a close, what should investors be looking for? And what does 2023 have in store? Remember, this is general information only, and you should speak to a professional advisor before making investment decisions. We've talked a lot this year to the team at Wilson Asset Management because they have a range of listed investment companies covering everything from micro caps to alternative assets. Catriona Burns is the lead portfolio manager at WAM Global and joins me this morning from New York. Catriona, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
Thanks so much for having me.
How would you describe the environment for global investors this year, or for Australian investors wanting to invest internationally?
I'd say it's been an environment of complexity but opportunity. It has been an incredibly dynamic operating environment for companies themselves in that really over the last 3 years since the pandemic hit. You had those initial supply chain disruptions, you had enormous fiscal monetary policy response. Then throw in this year Ukraine war, which exacerbated, supply chain pressures and energy supply issues caused for Europe. And then we had, following on from that, inflation levels not seen in 40 years and the subsequent central bank responses, as you alluded to. So it's certainly been a very dynamic operating environment, both for the companies and for global investors. I'd say what we're seeing now is economies around the world, depending on what stage they are of those central bank increases, starting to see economic growth slow. But at the same time, we are seeing inflation in certain areas like freight and used car prices, etc., thankfully coming down. And so we are working through some of those inflation headwinds. The piece that's still a bit of a wait and see is around wages, and in some areas of the world you are seeing some inflation pressure there. So what we'd say for markets generally is it's dynamic. We are seeing, in terms of that slowing economic growth, particular sectors like housing, for example, which is very interest rate sensitive, see falling demand. But other areas like healthcare are continuing to motor along, seeing significant amount of investment. So it's very much a stock picker's market. There are lots of opportunities because various share prices have come under pressure. But it's dynamic, and you have to stay close to the companies in our mind.
Kind of the theme from the last year or so seems to be, with respect to, what's his name, Zaphoid Beeblebrox and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic. That seems to be the theme from the last 12 months or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what about as you look forward? You're talking about opportunities and you mentioned healthcare. What are some of the themes that you're thinking about over the next 12 months for the WAM Global investment portfolio?
Absolutely, yeah. So we do see a lot of opportunities. I mean, what we've seen with the with the market volatility is that you have seen valuations across the board be hit by those rising interest rates. But what you have seen is that some companies' actual earnings have been very stable and continued to grow. And they're the sorts of businesses that we love to invest in, where their earnings are relatively stable. They can continue to grow through any macroeconomic environment. And there are a number of themes that we've identified that we love exposure to across the portfolio. And one of those areas is health and wellness, which, we think post-COVID, the focus on healthcare has only increased. You certainly have demographic tailwinds when you look across the world in many places. And as you see with people aging, and as I know, and I see from my parents, etc. People utilize the healthcare system more and more as they age. I think that's a great thematic. We've got various other thematics that we think have strong durability through any cycle, such as things like infrastructure underbuild, particularly in places like the US, where I am, data and analytics, the digitization of payments and automation. We think all of those thematics really do have longevity. There will be cycles. There's cycles in markets, there's cycles in economies, but these thematics we think are very much enduring and will continue to play out over the next decade and beyond.
I mean, a couple of names I know that you've spoken about previously. Thermo Fisher Scientific, it's a medical technology company. Just tell us what it does and why you like it.
Yeah, sure. So this is a business we've invested since the start of the WAM Global Fund. They deliver medical instruments and services to pharmaceutical companies, academia, laboratories doing diagnostics. And this is really a case of a business that in the health and healthcare sector, you can have companies that are very exposed to trial risk, a particular clinical trial, etc. And where the outcome's very binary, and they're not the kind of that we love to invest in. We prefer to invest in those picks and shovel businesses where they don't care which modality grows the fastest, which clinical trial is successful. They just sell to everyone and sell those instruments and services. So we think it's a great example of that. This is a really high quality management team that have consistently delivered, double digit earnings growth for over a decade. And they've been really smart with, as unfortunate as it might be, they did benefit from COVID in that they were a very important supplier, to all the testing, et cetera, that was done. And they've been very smart, though, in that they've reinvested the excess cash generated through that into opportunities that will really drive their growth for the next decade. So yeah, we think it's a great business that has multi-decades of growth ahead.
Stay with me, Catriona. We'll be back in a minute. My guest today is Catriona Burns, Lead Portfolio Manager at WAM Global. You mentioned infrastructure, and of course, energy infrastructure seems to be a very hot area at the moment. Another specific company that you've looked at, Quanta Services, Inc.
Yes. So it's a business, I've known for over 15 years. The US energy grid and, infrastructure is certainly an area that is in desperate need of investment, not just because of the underinvestment in the past, but also because we are seeing renewables introduced into the grid. We are seeing electric vehicles entered into the system, and all of these things put even more pressure on an electric grid that was already relatively underinvested in.
Yep.
So we think that Quanta, they are a specialty contractor that provides the services to upgrade the grid. And they're, again, they've got a very high quality management team that have done a great job executing over time. We think there's a real tailwind in terms of the various infrastructure, the pieces of legislation that have been announced in the last few years, such as the 2021 Infrastructure Jobs Act and the CHIPS Act, and then the more recent IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. So, I mean, the company's doing incredibly well already and growing well, but these will actually only increase the investment and provide even more certainty into the projects that are being done to invest in upgrading the grid over time.
Catriona, I've just thrown an energy infrastructure stock at you, a medical technology stock. How do you get your head around the literally thousands of companies on Wall Street and find the ones to pick?
Well, I think, there's an enormous amount of companies that are listed, but I think, we have some very clear parameters around the types of businesses that we will invest in and are very much grounded in our investment process. And so, we only look at companies that kind of tick all the boxes of the things we're looking for. And that is a number of things, including that we love businesses that have very strong industry positions, outstanding management teams, very solid earnings growth potential, and then reasonable valuations. And so we say we're looking for undervalued growth companies around the world, but then we overlay that with the requirement to only buy when we can identify a catalyst that we think will drive the share price higher. So, that can be whether that's an earnings beat potential, whether that's asset divestitures or M&A opportunities, etc. So, look, there are a lot of opportunities, but we need the companies that we're investing in to kind of tick all those boxes. And those two examples we've spoken about, Thermo Fisher Scientific and Quanta, for example, both market leaders in their respective sectors. As I mentioned, very high quality management teams and very solid earnings growth potential and reasonable valuations. So kind of tick all those boxes. Both have consistently beat and raised earnings over time. So, kind of tick that catalyst box. But yes, so that's kind of how we narrow down the universe from what is a relatively large number of opportunities out there.
Okay, one final question, Catriona, because you're on Wall Street. I can't not mention the tech sector. And when I say tech sector, I throw in companies like Tesla into that one. Pretty ordinary year, really. What's going to happen next year?
Absolutely. It's been a very interesting sector over the last year. And I think there'll be more interest to come here in terms of, like, you've just had this phenomenal last few years where, many businesses came to market that should have never. They were far too early in their life. You had businesses that, had absolutely no need to focus on profitability and had easy access to money to grow. And that environment has really changed with rising rates. And so it's really interesting to see, even when, I attended a conference a number of months ago, just to get a feel for where the heads of some of these companies were, the management of these companies were at, in terms of seeing the reality that free money is gone and you have to move to profitability. And I think some have got the reality check and are really in cost cutting and let's drive this business to become profitable, and others, are still a bit head in the sand. So I think there will be more fallout. Not all these businesses will necessarily survive. So I think, there's certain areas that you don't really want to go near. And then I think there will be, increased M&A. So, I had a fascinating meeting a couple of weeks ago in San Francisco with a tech company there who had said, we're looking at opportunities for mergers and acquisitions around us in the sector. And we had a company that had come to us last year saying, we want 300 mil for our business, and we just bought it. And they said, but we just bought it for 10 million.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Okay. So there are, and that company potentially wouldn't have survived. So they have to do what they can get. There will be more M&A. There'll be some businesses that don't survive. And then I think there will be opportunities, because some of the tech companies have great, business propositions. And if you are, if you can be selective and these business, identify the ones that aren't in desperate need of funding requirements, you will find opportunities.
It's a real Wilson Asset Management thing to look at management. And you've said this a couple of times, but even with the tech companies, good management really matters in those sorts of companies.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the ability to recognize that the environment has changed, that you need to, potentially change how you've operated your business, can be hard if that's how you've operated for however many years. But I think, the good management teams, even outside the tech set, the good management teams will really shine, particularly when the backdrop gets tougher.
Yeah, Catriona, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thanks so much.
That was Catriona Burns, Lead Portfolio Manager at WAM Global. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Remember, this is general information only and doesn't take into account your personal circumstances. You should get professional advice before making investment decisions. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.